right. Well, hello everyone. Nice to be here with you today. My name is Chris Simmons. I'm with IBM Security. I currently am the program director in our XForce research and development product management team. So the content that I have today is around threat intelligence. It's around using threat intelligence to make better decisions, to make faster decisions, and to be able to reduce the overall time to know is a key important topic, and also the time to act. Those are two key metrics that I hope throughout the presentation today that I'll be able to demonstrate to you how we're making strides at decreasing those two time metrics. So the first slide up here is about the statistics. And, you know, this is the, oh my God, Chris is going to scare the crap out of you slide. Okay. Yeah, this is much better. Yeah. Okay, so I would rather people be able to see the slides than you'd be able to see me. So you can still hear me at least. So I think this is better. So last year we did a survey of Chief Information Security Officers, and we asked them what their top challenges were. The thing that we found was that the landscape has changed over the last 3 years or so. The number two challenge here is worrying a lot about external threats. Okay, and so 40% of the respondents to the CISO survey said that this was a top challenge for them. All right, and so then as you dig into it a little bit more, you ask yourself, you know, what are those external threats? And it really boils down into three categories. The first one is breaches. So breach activity is, you know, goes without saying, personal information, loss of confidential information, trade secret, any type of activity that results in some sort of data loss that has value attached to it. The next method is the my slide here. I'm gonna make sure I'm leaving my slide. Sorry. is the attack methods. So we're seeing the designer attacks, your Heartbleed, your Poodle, these type of novel new attacks that affect a wide range of platforms. As well as the, I'm sorry, I got my designer vulnerabilities and my attack methods mixed, but the attack methods are much the same, combining multiple types of vulnerabilities, exploits, and malware to basically come up with campaigns that are novel and are very stealthy in nature. So the takeaway on this one, obviously, is that CISO's top of mind, they're worrying a lot about external threats. And so this brings us to the reality that everyone, including, you know, everyone in this room, is a target today. We are, whether it's our systems, whether it's our devices, our mobile devices that we have, or whether it's our own personal information. How many of you have had your credit card data stolen? Or credit card counterfeited? Yeah, most of us in the room, yeah? So, you know, the statistic that I have coming up a minute, it really shows you how this is not just becoming a cyber security problem, but a security problem. We have, you know, tons of records lost every day. So whether it's at your work or in your government or in your personal life, it carries the same reality across in that everyone is now a target. So this chart shows you, and I'm glad we dimmed the lights because this would have been a really difficult, you would have thought it was one of those red-green, are you colorblind tests. But this chart shows you over 2012, 13, and 14, we have bubbles which represent data breaches. The size of the bubble indicates the amount of data lost. The color indicates the industry. And I encourage all of you to get a copy of the presentation and look at the reports that we have available that are linked at the end of the presentation, which will give you a little bit better view than this will. But the key carryaways here are that we're having these daily leaks of sensitive information. They're increasing year over year. The methods and records are increasing. And it comes down to, it's a top of mind issue. We shouldn't have to really drive home this point, but to set us up for the next part about threat intelligence sharing, it really is important to kind of make this connection, that things have kind of gotten out of hand. We're in a battle with cyber criminals, and we're frankly losing the race. If you look at the 2014 breaches over 2013, we see a 25% increase. And the thing that I like about this slide, let's see if I can get some laser action going on this thing. That might be asking too much. No. Okay, yeah. So here is the population of the US, between 400 and 500 million. Population of the EU, 500, 600 million. So in 2013, the number of records surpassed both of those. So think about that. Every person in the United States collectively has had their personal information stolen in some way. EU. But then here we are up at India and China, which reach up into the billions. And in 2014, year to date, which was when this report came out, it was at the end of the year, but the final numbers hadn't come in. It was around this number whenever it finally did boil out. But we're reaching that level where the largest of nation states now, the total records loss. So again, trying to really come back to this point of we're losing this race in a big way, because the record loss and the record breach just doesn't show signs of stopping. In terms of vulnerabilities now, I like to think of, data breaches are usually the result of some type of complex attack. Vulnerabilities are one way to get there. Exploiting some software, whether it be on a mobile device, a server, a desktop, et cetera. The interesting thing about this slide is that in 2014, we on our XForce team, we cataloged 9,200 new vulnerabilities. And that alone by itself is a jump over the previous years, because around 2007-ish, so we started seeing some attrition where the vulnerabilities became out of vogue. Can any of you, I guess off the top of your heads, think of what kind of was becoming more in fashion around this 2010 time frame through now? Anyone? It was kind of like the rise of malware, if you will. Vulnerabilities become like the passe way to break in. Not to say that it went anywhere, but it just wasn't in the front of the news. It was the malware that really was taking us into the news now. So the shift of focus and the shift of attention kind of went over to that area. But then here in 2014, something really strange happened. We had CertCC begin including Android vulnerabilities and Android exploits in their disclosures. Before that, we only had traditional server desktop type disclosure records. So what happened wasn't so much that it was the vulnerability and the malware argument that I just made. It was really that the platform had changed. The focus was no longer on the desktop, it was on the mobile device. And so the message here, what I want to send home to you is that this is going to continue to evolve. It has evolved over the span of my career many times, and probably many times more before I reach the end of my career. And the one constant is that the attackers always go after the low-hanging fruit, the easy targets, where they can get the most benefit for the least amount of money. These are businessmen. They are getting a great return on investment because they're just basically scraping whatever they can, the easiest way they can, whether it's malware, whether it's exploits, whether it's credit card data. We had an interesting conversation over lunch about the cost of credit card fraud. I don't know how many of you know that today is the first day that the new chip laws go into effect. So, or or chip mandates, I guess, if you will, not so much law. But previous to today, a magnetic stripe on the back of a credit card was covered by either the issuing bank or the company, the data processor. Somewhere along the line, they were covered. The merchant, the person who actually did the transaction was not responsible, neither was the actual card holder. Well, after today, that changes a little bit, because unless they start ratcheting it up, because magnetic stripes are so cheap and so easy, the barrier to entry for counterfeiting is so low that we have to go to a harder to use technology. So the message here is the same thing that I want to drive home with what we're tasked with doing. We're not taking care of some of the easiest things possible that we could do to raise the bar, to raise the level of security. You know, if you take a look at these breaches, you see some disturbing trends. So you see a lack of overall security fundamentals. Passwords. You know, I think most of us can agree that passwords are no longer a good security tool. They're the magnetic stripe. Easy to break, very cheap to counterfeit, easy to get a hold of and use for bad deeds. But really, password reuse is even a step further. You know, using unique passwords are easy to break. Reusing your same password that you use for Bank of America, that you also use for your government systems, or your healthcare website, just horrible practices that we have to educate our end users better about. Password reuse is just one example. Default passwords. The poor challenge questions, using challenge questions that anyone that forgets to secure their Facebook page can probably figure out. These are the type of fundamental security flaws that are resulting in breaches. Then we have cracks in the foundation. So I mentioned Heartbleed, Poodle, other attacks that we have seen in recent years where we have this widely dispersed software. We should have learned this lesson with Windows. Windows had a huge adoption rate, and so it was the prime target. Well, guess what? Now Linux is a bigger target. The rise of Shodan, the search engine for the Internet of Things, can show you every type of vulnerable router that's running, some vulnerable version of Linux that hasn't been patched or firmware updated. And, now you've got a launching point for distributed denial of service attacks that basically is sitting at the farthest point of every home user's wireless router. It's just a really mind-blowing idea that the operating systems and the applications themselves are really at the core of what part of the problem is here. And then finally, the shrinking privacy. So maybe it's not you who did something wrong, but it's the person that you trusted your data to. Or it could be the password issue related to the fact that our data is hanging out on the cloud now where it wasn't before. So anyway, the key three tenets here, the fundamentals, the cracks in the foundation, and the privacy, are all leading us to a realization that we're going to have to face the reality that that we will be attacked, that we will be penetrated, and we have to take a fresh and new approach to the problem. And part of that approach is around collaboration. The bad actors out in the world, they're already collaborating. We have statistics after statistic after statistic showing that these guys use very sophisticated dark web type underground hangout places to buy, sell, trade, and collaborate on what attacks are working and where they're working. And we're not keeping up as the good guys. We're not keeping pace with the bad guys in this collaboration effort. And so if the bad guys are collaborating, the question becomes, why aren't we doing the same? Why aren't we doing a better job ourselves? The reality is that we're going to have to adopt more models of a collective defense strategy. It's no longer enough to to build the moat around your castle, draw up the bridge, and put some guards on top, and try to defend everything from getting in. From the proliferation of mobile and cloud to the sophistication of the attacks, the whole idea that we are going to make ourselves immune from these threats that we're facing today without some type of vaccination within the community, if you will, is a really, really important concept to kind of grasp and get a hold of. We have to look at industries. We have to look at geographies and consider that, you know, an attack against my neighbor is an attack against me. And I need to do what I can in order to learn from their mistake. You know, if their car window got broken into, maybe I should take all the things out of my car and not leave any reason for someone to want to break my window. You know, it's just common sense. If you know a pattern of activity is happening, then take some steps to learn to either preempt or take a faster action. Maybe it's installing a security camera, you know, in the car example. But you know, we have to do a better job of sharing. And so this brings us to the idea of the different industries and organizations that are out there that provide sharing frameworks. How many of you guys are part of an ISAC, Information Sharing and Analysis Consortium? Anyone? 1, 2, 3, good. I'd say roughly half the room, it looks like. That's very encouraging. Whenever I say ISAC, I also mean ISAL, which is not necessarily aligned to industry. But these guys are the ones that's really taking this charge forward, taking the idea of information sharing, that we've got to do a better job of helping each other in order to help us all. Because what happens when, let's say you have 10 banks, and one of those banks is hit with a new sophisticated attack that results in data breach. All right? If those 10 banks are collaborating with one another, then when one gets hit, the other 9 learn of it. They learn of the attack. They know what to look for now. All right? That's where the information sharing comes in. And they benefit from the fact that one of their consortium members got hit. It's an unfortunate case, but it's the reality. Would you rather 100% get hit or 10%? You know, it's the law of statistics here. So my first ask of the community is to communicate. Get involved with these organizations. There's the ISA that's got a booth set up here. I noticed as I walked in, you know, if you haven't met with those guys or talked with them, you know, spend time to collaborate and communicate. The next idea is around threat intelligence. So whenever you talk or you speak with a person, whether it's by picking up the phone or whether it's by attending a meeting face-to-face or whether it's by other methods that we'll talk about in a moment, you are exchanging threat intelligence. You're telling someone else what you know about a particular threat, whether it be aligned to your industry or whether it be aligned to your geography or the public sector, private sector, et cetera. Using that threat intelligence, putting it to work, it's not easy, but it is worth it. We can look at the overall number of events that we have in a year. Our operations centers that monitor customer networks generated or estimate that every company that has an enterprise definition has around 92 million events that they need to process. This can be firewall logs, endpoint management logs. You know, there's a lot of different types of things that define what an event is, just so we're clear. But the idea is that there are quite a number of them. Now, how many of those security events are an actual part of an attack? It could be attacks of opportunity, things that are just spray and pray to attempt to penetrate some defense that you have out there. But the idea is that there are a much smaller number that actually turn into incidents. By using your threat intelligence, you can, okay, sorry guys. By using your threat intelligence, you can reduce those numbers. You can take the raw data and figure out if it's a false positive and hopefully not false negatives that you wouldn't see, but you can whittle the information down to something that's more manageable. Using the threat intelligence is one aspect along with communication. And then there's also the idea that there are a lot of internal and external threat intelligence feeds. So now we're taking the idea of me picking up the phone and calling my consortium member or going to a meeting and talking about a threat to taking the data that I have available. So there's web logs over on the internal side, DNS records, you know, all the kind of data that I have in-house. So I like to call this area what I see happening in this area. And then over here is your external threat intelligence. These are the different groups. It could be open source phishing indicators. Another one here is passive DNS information, IP reputation, information from law enforcement about particular activities that are going on, the ISACs and ISALs of the world. So you've got a lot of different external threat intelligence. So the challenge with operationalizing this is how do I get all of this, what I see happening on my network and what I see happening out on the internet at large, do a cross-section of those to figure out it's happening in the community, it's happening on my network, this is something I really need to be concerned with. So that's where the value is, getting at the internal and external threat intelligence, and the only way to really do this effectively and operationalize it is to have good tools. You've got to have really good advanced analytics, and human intelligence can never be removed from this equation because at some point someone has to look at this and verify it. And so advanced analytics and human intelligence are really key and critical to being able to solve the operationalizing of using threat intelligence to hone your security, to guide your security practices. So this brings us to the idea of sharing and collaborating to get to that level of collective defense that I mentioned. So what we need is the ability to have a platform that allows me to consume, share, and then take action on threat intelligence. Ideally, it's one that's open. An open platform means that I can see the indicators, I can see the data sources. There's nothing that's restricting me from using the data to the best of my ability to put it into action. The fact that it is actionable. It's great to tell me about a threat, but if you don't tell me what potential solutions are to it, then you've taken me up to the front door that's locked and not given me the key. So give me the key so that I can really take the action to do something about the threat. And then finally, we believe that the social aspect, mimicking the way that we communicate in the physical world, of actually picking up the phone, going to those meetings, and collaborating with one another is critical to enable this collective defense idea and model. And so it should come as no surprise that at IBM, we've been working on such a platform, this threat intelligence and sharing platform idea. Ideally, you want to have security analysts and researchers as well as operations centers and the products and technologies all feeding from the same set of data, so that, or feeding from a common set of data where you can put inputs and get outputs out, meaning that I can observe indicators, I can synthesize those indicators into security incidents, and then I can turn those incidents into actions that will actually result in protection in my networks or in the area that I'm responsible for protecting. So once you have all this intelligence, you really have to understand the attack chain, and you have to fully integrate the the threat intelligence in order to get the value. We've covered this a couple times, but the idea that you want to act early as possible in this attack chain. If you can prevent someone from breaking in, you can prevent data loss. The cost, while there's more upfront costs, as we're seeing the fallout of some of the data breaches and some of the ramifications of allowing data to go all the way down to the exfiltration layer, it's actually saving money in the long run. The integration goes to using the threat intelligence as the core. And that's really what we're trying to demonstrate here, is the idea that when you have this intelligence of what I see happening on my network combined with what I see happening in the community, overlaying those together, I can guide my prevention, I can guide my detection, and most importantly, I can guide my response. Because ultimately, I'm going to be that 1 out of 10 that gets hit one day, and I've got to have some tools to be able to understand and respond quickly. So when we talk about investigating those breaches that ultimately will happen, there's a couple of key things to keep in mind. You want to make sure you have a great incident and forensics platform. You want to be able to reconstruct that attack activity, not only for your own benefit of knowing what happened, because you've obviously got a gap. If you have a breach, you have a gap. You've got to identify what that gap is and then figure out what method will I use, or what process improvement or product improvement or whatever can I use to close that gap. So understanding is a key, a very key step in getting to that better level of protection. The real-time incident response really comes from having great endpoint management tools. So whenever you do learn about something, you've got endpoints, all around the world, or at home offices, wherever you can get that intelligence out to them. You can make them inoculated or aware of the latest things that you've, as a security officer, have become aware of. And then finally, realize and plan for the fact that one day you're going to need to call a friend. Just like on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you're going to need to pick up that phone and dial the lifeline. Know who that is, have it ready, so that when that day comes, you're ready to get the help that you need when you ultimately do have that unfortunate breach. So we've talked about the threat intelligence, and we've talked about collaborating and learning about things. But then there's the final step, and this is one that a lot of people miss. They don't take the step of sharing back. You've learned, we've witnessed this on our sites that we have, Wikipedia. I'm trying to think of some more examples outside the security realm, but anywhere where there is community contributed content, your ratio of givers to takers is very out of, that ratio is very predictable. You have a lot more people taking the information or consuming the information than people who are contributing the information. And it's because it's that final step. It's taking it to the point of saying, I have something in my head, I know something that could help someone else, but actually putting that into action and doing it, actually doing the share back. And that's critical in the platform and critical for the defense that we're trying to get to, which is to ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, raise the bar on the hackers, raise the cost of doing business for them. Don't let them use the same malware that they used on another agency in a particular segment on you and be just as effective. Use that power, and then once you know about it, if you are the one that gets hit and you learn about it, share that back to the community for their benefit. So at IBM, we have such a platform. We have real-time threat intelligence feeding through it. And we have the ability to really use this much like you would use Wikipedia. You won't be able to see this well, so I'll explain it to you. You have URL and IP reports. You can attach malware reports and different pieces of forensic information that you've collected about a particular threat. and then you can do a write-up on it, and then you can either export that back to your incident response platform, to your SIM, or you can share this information to the public or to a group of people. Maybe it's your industry cohorts. Maybe it's something by geography. But the idea is that you're collecting, gathering the information, you're synthesizing it into intelligence, and then you're sharing it. And so we're providing an open, free platform for people to do that. That's called our XForce Exchange. And so the final key message here that I want to leave you with is that you, every one of you, are part of this solution. We have to, we're in this together, whether it's at our work, in our government level, or at our home. We're all in this together, and everyone can play a part in this solution. Whether we're in the security community, and this is what it's going to take to move us beyond where we are today, which is everyone's getting hit and constantly compromised, and you know, the bad guys just seem to be winning this arms race of sorts. So I invite you to the platform to check it out, and I also want to take a moment just to mention that if you, I'm assuming everyone will have access to the presentation. We have a threat intelligence quarterly report, then we've got some up here, and maybe put them out. All of this information is here, but really the thing that we want out of all of you is to collaborate with us. We want you to join the platform and get involved. That's what it's going to take. When we get the crowd motivated and everyone moving in the right direction, we're going to really raise the bar on the bad guys, and they're going to have to come up with some new tricks. So I invite you to be part of that with us. And then finally, I want to thank you for your time, and I think that I've left enough time. Yeah, it looks like we've got about 5-10 minutes for any questions or comments. Anything that I've talked about it through the course of the presentation that you guys might want to expand on, I'd be glad to talk about. Yeah, sure.
Your site, securityintelligence.com, is that the wiki that you have to provide information?
No, securityintelligence.com is a blog of sorts. It's really IBM and industry-sourced blog entries. But from there, you can get to our site, the XForce Exchange. The actual link is here, xforce.ibmcloud.com.
So it's just like a wiki where you just kind of type in the narrative of what happened, and does somebody review and collaborate and pull together all those narratives?
So the idea is that you create, at least our idea is that we provide the back-end threat intelligence. We have information about just about every IP address possible, historical information dating back into the late 90s for vulnerabilities. IBM XForce has almost 2 decades worth of vulnerability information. It's a very, very broad and deep level of vulnerability information. Malware information. So we've got all the pieces. You pull them together and to tell us what you're seeing. You can either keep that private just to yourself and take it back to your incident response platform, or you could share it with your coworkers, or you could share it with an ISAC, or you could share it with the world. It's your choice. That's the model that we have built with the platform.
How long has the platform been up?
We launched in April of this year, and I was telling one of my coworkers at lunch today that as of yesterday, I believe it was, we just crossed over 9,100 registered users. So we're pretty excited about the overall ramp rate. And again, it's free, it's open. There's no cost of signing up, logging in, and seeing what it's all about.
So included in that is some mitigation strategies?
There are some mappings to product protections for the IBM product family, but in the wiki space, you can, it's basically whatever you want it to be. So I could have a section in this wiki space about mitigation strategies. As we develop and mature the platform, I expect that we will continue to augment that and make it an official area of the collection, mitigation techniques or strategies.
So I might have missed this, but what kind of vetting do you do for that? Because the whole reason the ISACs have a subscription model so that there's some sort of vetting and trust there. If this is just free and open to the world, I could see very easily a hacker getting on there and being like, oh, if you've seen this, go ahead and download this tool and it will fix it.
Right. Well, first and foremost, you're absolutely right. Water hole attacks are a very common method of malware and attack propagation. But we do have safeguards in place for that. Also, we're in the process of implementing crowdsource voting. So let's say I create a collection about Heartbleed, and then my friend creates a collection about Heartbleed. They're two competing public collections about the same thing. Well, which one has more value? We're planning to use the Facebook like model to allow content to be upvoted, so that over time your more valuable collections float to the top and the less valuable content sinks to the bottom. So that's the approach that we're taking. In general, that is very effective. Our research has shown that it's also effective against people who are trying to mislead or provide false information, because once you reach a certain critical mass, the good is going to outweigh anyone who's trying to, throw a monkey wrench into the system. But it's a great question, and it's one that we are constantly thinking and rethinking about in order to, provide the most value that we can and keep out the bad stuff. Another idea, that just popped in my mind, sharing publicly is something that a lot of people just haven't gotten to a comfort level of. But there's no, the way that threat intelligence is structured, at least on our site, is it's more of a discovery. It's not connected to anything, and you don't have to comment or participate in that conversation. You can just be that consumer. And if you see some collection that looks like it could be something interesting to you, go over to your platforms and see if you're seeing that type of activity. If you're not, you move on. So there's limited ability for someone to distribute tools of harm, I guess, I would say. The other thing that comes to mind, though, is that sharing publicly takes a leap of faith in the community itself. That's why we have that intermediate between private stuff that I'm not going to share with anyone, and stuff that I share with perhaps my coworkers, and then stuff I share with ISACs or ISALs, and then stuff that I share more globally. But there's that gray area in between there where you can have trust. Last point about trust leads you to credibility and the value of threat intelligence. If you have 10 feeds that you are pulling in from open source, or let's say it's a trusted feed, how do you know that an indicator here in feed 1, an indicator in feed 2, an indicator in feed 3, that all say the same thing? Number one, how do you prevent that from becoming circular reporting? Basically, because one feed's reporting it now, the second feed is reporting it, and eventually they're all reporting it, So be careful with multiple threat intelligence sources of circular reporting is one caution. Another is don't trust it just because it appears in more than one feed because of circular reporting. And then also the recognition that in our studies at least, threat intelligence feeds, especially around IP reputation, you can take two IP reputation feeds and do a cross-section of them, and they'll have less than maybe 10 to 20% overlap. So what one company sees, another company will not. It's just the nature of doing business. The internet is a big place. Some companies are going to see X, another set of companies are going to see Y. That's why we ultimately do believe that the collaboration, sharing, and bringing the information together into one place is the right way and the right approach to boil up and get the value out of the threat intelligence.
Is there a standard means by which everyone will be forced to report the threat? Otherwise, if they're reported in different manners or different concepts or different priorities, it'd be hard to link and find patterns and establish that type of activity.
Exactly. So today we do IP, URL, web applications. We do malware, MD5 hash type stuff. So we have some structure. There are some standards organizations and movements afoot that provide for standardized information exchange, specifically talking about sticks and taxi. So these are the two areas. Our platform supports sticks and taxi today. So I can take the data from a third-party system, move it into the platform. We actually today don't use anyone else's data. Like we won't treat that as like we just use the IP address or the MD5 hash or the URL, and then we match it to our data. So we don't mix data today. But we use the import to do the matching, and then we build that collection, present it to you. And then once you get everything done like you want it, you can export it, take it back out of the platform, and then whatever the importing platform on the other side chooses to do with it, is fair game.
Okay, so there has to be some sort of record already in there that you have found, not necessarily that somebody else has found, for there to be a match.
Correct.
So if I were to identify something that was new, share it here, if there was no supporting record that you had independently found, that information wouldn't be available to others.
No, that's correct. I mean, there will be a record on every IP. Every valid IP address has a record. Every MD5 hash, maybe not. Every URL, maybe not. Malware families is another area that we support. So, we don't have a lot of feedback, honestly, today telling us, oh, you don't have this malware family or things like that, or your hash didn't show a report on a result on it. We're using a lot of cross-referencing in various feeds to make sure that we've got good coverage. So we're pretty confident in that. That's not to say that for a particular IP category, especially, like I mentioned, I mean, an IP address could be a spamming IP address 1 minute, it could be a valid website the next minute, and it could be an email or CNC server the next minute. That's just the nature of the internet. The nature of these IP addresses and their risk rating can change very rapidly. And that's why we'll never have, people think of this panacea that one day we'll all agree on what these IP addresses, or that there'll be perfect sync, and it's just not going to happen. Things change too rapidly, and the landscape is too diverse. But, future, we're considering allowing external data, but that has a set of challenges, both legally and, whose data is it that we're working through internally. So today we just use our data. That way it's cut and dry. Any other questions? Really good questions, actually. Things that we think about a lot. Oh, yeah.
I attended session 12 when we signed the threat lines. Do you guys do anything with that? Or
I have many emails that I need to return from my friends that over there. We're focusing on this platform first, honestly. The Cyber Threat Alliance, I'm not saying that we won't join it, but we haven't joined it to date. But it's something that we're thinking about. Question to you would be, do you see value in that? As the product manager, I always like to get feedback. Are these type of alliances, have you seen any value from?
I'm just giving feedback.
Okay,
I was just curious.
yeah.
Follow up on that, it would expand the database of known issues, right?
To some extent, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we already participate in like Microsoft programs. They have a very well-established virus and malware program. So there's things at the IBM level and at the IBM XForce security level that we participate in for information sharing already. But it's the idea of taking someone else's data and sucking it into our system that we haven't worked through the loopholes of that yet. Yeah. It's like you take egg and you take flour and you mix them together and let's say you make a cake. You can't give someone back the egg. Once you've made the cake, it's done. I mean, I guess if you're really crafty and come up with some sort of chemical magic, you could probably get something back out. But you understand the concept. But the idea is that we want the information to become free. We want the intelligence to become free. We want it to belong to the community. That's what we want. But there are a lot of paid offerings and free offerings and that are out there today, and so we just try very diligently not to get our data mixed up with others' data. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all. Really appreciate it.